Here is the question nobody is asking loudly enough. Why can't Iran negotiate its way out of this? Not why won't Iran, why can't it? Because the answer is not diplomacy. It is not sanctions pressure or Western intransigence or the particular personalities sitting across the table in Doha. The answer is institutional. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the institution that actually holds decision-making authority inside the Islamic Republic, has objectives that are structurally incompatible with any outcome the United States can accept while maintaining its own strategic commitments in the region. Not barely incompatible, not bridgeable with creative diplomatic language, structurally, categorically, fundamentally incompatible. And that incompatibility is the engine driving everything you are watching happen from the Persian Gulf to the interior of Iran right now. To understand why, you have to understand what the IRGC is actually trying to achieve. Not what it says publicly, what it actually wants. The IRGC is not fighting this war to control the Strait of Hormuz for its own sake. The strait is leverage. It is the mechanism through which the institution generates bargaining power against the United States that has enough economic and political stake in Gulf energy security to be compelled to negotiate under certain conditions. The strait is a tool. The underlying objective, the one the IRGC has been protecting at all costs for decades, is institutional survival through nuclear weapons capability. The entire long-term strategic plan rests on a sequence. Use the strait as leverage to force American withdrawal from the region, use the diplomatic breathing room created by that withdrawal to complete the nuclear weapons development program, emerge with a nuclear deterrent that makes direct military action against the Islamic Republic prohibitively costly for any external actor, and then govern Iran indefinitely from behind the protection of that deterrent. That is the plan. It has been the plan. It is still the plan. That is why every set of demands the IRGC has put forward in every negotiating interaction in this conflict are not opening bids, they are minimum requirements. Full war reparations, American withdrawal from the entire region, unrestricted right to develop a nuclear program. Those are not positions from which both sides make concessions and arrive at a compromise. Those are statements of what the IRGC actually needs from a settlement to preserve its institutional position. And those requirements are incompatible with any American strategic interest in the region, any Gulf Arab partner nation security, any Israeli government survival calculus, and any international non-proliferation framework that has ever existed. The Iranian foreign minister, the president, the diplomats who show up to Doha meetings and sometimes deny being there at the same moment their own president announces the meeting from the Oval Office, these are the westward-facing representatives of a regime whose actual decision-making authority lies with the IRGC. They cannot make a deal without IRGC approval. The IRGC will not approve any deal that does not preserve its nuclear program, its regional proxy network, and its dominant position in the Islamic Republic's internal power structure. None of those conditions are compatible with any agreement the United States can sign while maintaining its own strategic commitments in the region. So the negotiations have been theater. Not cynically, the diplomats involved are genuinely attempting to find a framework both sides can accept, but structurally theater. Because the institution that actually holds decision-making authority in Tehran has objectives that cannot be satisfied by any agreement the United States can sign. The IRGC wants to win. Winning means preserving the regime in a form that can eventually acquire nuclear weapons. Washington has made clear, through presidential statement, publicly, repeatedly, that Iran will not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. These positions are not bridgeable. And that structural incompatibility is what explains the American decision to move from degrading Iranian military capability to taking Iranian economic infrastructure. If you cannot negotiate with someone toward an acceptable outcome, the alternative is removing their capacity to sustain the conflict. Not by destroying weapons faster than they can be replaced, but by eliminating the financial mechanism that funds the entire enterprise. But before we arrive at the economic dimension, understand the military context those negotiations have been running inside. An Apache went down over the Strait of Hormuz. A Shahed drone hit it. Both crew members survived because an autonomous sea drone got to them first, pulling them out of the water while they floated in the Persian Gulf. The drone apparently didn't detonate on impact. One failed Iranian explosive mechanism is the difference between a dramatic incident and a catastrophe for two American families. One detonation failure, and Washington still called it what it was: a brutal attack on American forces. The clock started. Night 1 was the opening statement. Precision munitions into Iranian air defense batteries, radar sites, and ground control stations, ringing the strait and extending across the country. Night 2 intensified. More Iranian air defense architecture being dismantled. More IRGC command and control going dark. The Secretary of Defense issued 3 words before Night 3. We will be busy tonight. Night 3 was 49 Tomahawk cruise missiles from a single destroyer, distributed across the full geographic depth of Iranian territory, accompanied by the full layer strike architecture of the American military. Wild weasels hunting radar emitters, strike eagles dropping bunker-busting ordnance on hardened underground facilities, F-35s tracking Iranian reactions in real time, carrier-based F-18 launching off decks in the Arabian Sea. Here is the IRGC's response picture. It claims strikes against American targets across multiple regional bases. It sends drones into the 5th Fleet's anchorage. It fires a long-range missile at a base housing F-35s. It claims success at every stage, from every platform, in every operation. And then, here is the data point behind those claims. IRGC ballistic missile stockpiles are down approximately 90% from pre-conflict levels. 90%. An institution that once launched hundreds of missiles in a single coordinated salvo, the kind of overwhelming mass launch that saturates even sophisticated air defense networks, is now launching salvos of 10, waiting multiple days between launches, rationing the last remnants of a strategic weapons program the American campaign has been systematically eliminating phase by phase. When you see the IRGC launch 10 missiles and then go quiet for 3 days before launching again, that is not tactical patience. That is an institution counting what it has left and deciding which targets are worth spending the remaining inventory against. That is inventory management at the edge of depletion, conducted by a military force that knows its most consequential weapons are nearly gone and cannot be replaced because the production infrastructure and resupply corridors are being closed simultaneously. The ceasefire revealed the IRGC's reconstitution strategy. During the pause, it dug out its missiles, repositioned its inventory, rebuilt what the first phase of strikes had destroyed, and prepared to resume from an improved position. It used the ceasefire exactly as it was designed to be used. That tells you the IRGC's theory of this conflict. Survive the campaign. Accept the damage. Rebuild during any pause. Resume from a stronger base. It has been running variations of this playbook for decades. The problem is what comes next. You cannot reconstitute your way back from losing Karg Island. The announcement that the terminal handling 90% of Iran's crude oil exports would come under American operational control, along with other oil infrastructure managing Iran's energy markets, is not a military escalation in the conventional sense. Every previous strike has been framed in the language of maritime security. Karg Island is different. It is acquisition. It is the United States taking the financial heart of the Islamic Republic and holding it. $500 million per day was flowing through that terminal, into the accounts that pay IRGC personnel, fund proxy networks from Lebanon to Yemen to Iraq to Syria, sustain weapons programs, and maintain the patronage structures through which the institution has secured political loyalty inside Iran for 4 decades. Without that revenue, the IRGC cannot pay the people executing its side of this conflict. It cannot fund the holdout strategy. The reconstitution playbook requires that the underlying economic infrastructure of the regime remain intact enough to fund the reconstitution. Karg Island, under American control, removes that infrastructure from the equation in a way that no military strike campaign achieves by itself. Destroying weapons eliminates current inventory. Taking Karg eliminates the mechanism that buys the next inventory. The Iranian air traffic control system is telling its people to disregard the Tomahawks as lightning. The IRGC is claiming the Strait of Hormuz is closed while hundreds of vessels transit it. The deputy foreign minister is denying meetings that the American president announces from the Oval Office. And the Marines on the USS Tripoli are looking at the intelligence picture that force reconnaissance has been building of Karg Island's defenses, knowing that the presidential announcement about taking it was not a conditional statement. This is the endgame shape, a regime whose actual decision makers have objectives incompatible with any negotiated settlement. A military institution whose ballistic missile stockpile is at 10% of what it started with, whose air defense has been stripped to irrelevance, whose coastal infrastructure has been reduced to dispersed, degraded remnants, whose underground reconstituted facilities are being found and targeted at the moment of their construction. And now, the financial infrastructure that sustains all of it, the $500 million daily pulse of the institution's existence, publicly announced as the next acquisition. The IRGC's assumption has been that it can outlast whatever pressure is applied. That assumption has sustained it through decades of sanctions and limited military exchanges. It has never been tested against what is being applied to it right now. Not just military pressure, not just financial pressure. The simultaneous removal of both the weapons and the money that buys the next weapons, applied faster than any reconstitution strategy can operate. The institution that has been running the Islamic Republic for 4 decades does not know how to run any other play. That is not a criticism, it is a structural observation. It was built to survive external pressure through ideological commitment, institutional cohesion, and the assumption that the external actor will eventually stop. The American campaign, as it is currently constituted, is designed specifically to remove the conditions that assumption requires in order to operate. The IRGC is running its final play, the one it has always run, and the conditions that made that play work every previous time it was tested are being systematically removed.